scripture reading this morning is Isaiah 43, 1 through 2. But now thus says the Lord, who created you, O Jacob, and he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you.
Good morning. Happy Sabbath. This morning, I want to talk to you about, or study with you, Daniel 3. I'm sure most of us have heard this story, but I want to take you on a different look at it. But I want to get you caught up in Daniel, where they are when we get to Daniel 3. So Daniel and his 3 friends have been living in Jerusalem, just doing their thing, living their life, when the prophecies of Isaiah started coming true. It would seem that their lives took an unfortunate turn, but God had big plans for them. They stuck together and made the decisions to stand for God from the very beginning. You can read this part of the story in Daniel 1 and 2. This part of the story also has relevance for our lives, but I encourage you to read it on your own and see what God tells you. So Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, are taken captive. Then Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor drink the king's wine. This is important. Hint, they are in Babylon. And his 3 friends said, okay, we'll go along with you on that stand. Because of their healthy, probably vegan diet, they find favor with the chief eunuchs. And when the king tested them, they were 10 times smarter than all the others. Because the king was smart too. He made them part of his government. Then King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream he couldn't remember. Don't you hate that? He felt like it was really important, but he could not, for the life of him, remember what the dream was. Fortunately for him, or unfortunately, as the case turned out to be, he had magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell him his dream. Except they couldn't. They tried stalling for time, even tried to reason with the king, but this just made him mad. And he decided that they all must die. For some reason, Daniel was not called to this middle of the night meeting. Maybe he was so new to the position that they just forgot about him. But they didn't forget about him when the king said all of the aforementioned magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans would be cut into pieces and their houses made into ash heaps. Turns out this is King Nebuchadnezzar's favorite threat, by the way. Daniel asks why the rush to kill everyone, and he is told. Then Daniel goes to the king and says, give me some time. I might be able to tell you your dream and its interpretation. And the king says, sure. I'll do anything to remember my dream. Daniel once again goes to his friends and says, we have a big problem that only God can solve. We need to pray. And they do. Daniel is given the dream and the interpretation. The next day, Daniel goes to the king, but instead of taking any credit for knowing the dream or the meaning of it, he gives all the glory to his God, the God of Israel. Daniel tells him the dream of the statue with the head of gold, Babylon, the chest and arms of silver, Persia, the belly and thighs of bronze, Greece, the legs of iron, Rome, and the feet of iron and clay, all the kingdoms after Rome. This gains Daniel and his friends promotions, and they live happily ever after. Just kidding. This brings us to the beginning of our sermon today. Daniel's interpretation of the dream didn't sit well with King Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't want his kingdom to end or his legacy, so he got a brilliant idea. He would have a statue made like the one in his dream, except he would have it made of all pure gold, the whole thing, just to show anyone who might be thinking about a coup that he was the king and that his kingdom would last for all time. He had just been telling Daniel that his God was the one true God, but here he is trying to change prophecy. Does this ring a bell with anyone? About maybe another Babylon and another king that wants to change prophecy? We need to make sure that we are not following false prophecies in our lives. Are we trying to live a life that is contrary to God's will? Maybe you think, I'm going to do this in my life. This is what I'm going to do. And God says, no, I have another plan for you. So he pushes you, maybe shoves you, encourages you to go in another direction. There was something King Nebuchadnezzar forgot. He was not actually in charge. God was and still is. So if you want to turn with me to Daniel 3, 1 through 7, we'll read the first part of this chapter. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. Does anybody know what a cubit is anymore? No? It's about 100 feet tall and 10 feet wide. So it's a big statue, all of gold. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered together for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace." So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and lyre, in symphony with all kinds of music, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the king is called together everyone of importance from all over his kingdom. Now his kingdom pretty much was the known world at that point. This is something to remember as we go further in this story. The pressure to conform and do what everyone else is doing is going to be powerful. He is turning his back on the real truth that he has been shown, but the intellectual truth will not get him all the way to God. He needs a heart transplant, but that isn't going to happen yet. Nebuchadnezzar does not have good self-control, as we will see in this story. He tends to swing from one extreme to the other. He was falling down in front of Daniel, worshiping Daniel's God, but now he wants everyone to fall down to worship him in his kingdom. He was probably afraid for his kingdom to end because he didn't see a future beyond his own life. The lesson is that we cannot depend on people. His way of figuring out the dream and its interpretation was not getting him anywhere. Only the God of heaven could give him the answers he wanted. When Nebuchadnezzar made the image, he unknowingly made an image of the king of the north that is mentioned later in Daniel. This king of the north is Satan. So let's look at Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation, on the farthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lowest depths of the pit. I went to 15, but that's all right. Nebuchadnezzar doesn't even realize that he is personifying something that will not be good for him. God keeps calling him back from something that will be a true end to himself. Isn't God so good to us? He does the same thing for us. We may not be a king and can make a golden statue 10 feet tall, but we certainly walk away from God. The people who had gathered are told that they will hear music, and when they hear the music, they must bow down and worship the false prophecy, image. If they don't, they will be thrown into a fiery burning furnace. That is right there where they can see it and probably smell it. The worship is fear-induced. It isn't out of love or loyalty. That should give us a clue if somebody's trying to force us into a certain type of worship. What Nebuchadnezzar is saying about throwing anyone who refuses to bow down into the fiery furnace is the exact opposite of what God says is going to happen in the last days. So let's look at Ezekiel 22, 18 through 22. Ezekiel 22, 18 through 22. Son of man, the house of Israel has become dross to me. They are all bronze, tin, iron, and lead. In the midst of a furnace, they have become dross from silver. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, because you have all become dross, therefore, behold, I will gather you into the midst of Jerusalem. As men gather silver, bronze, iron, lead, and tin into the midst of a furnace to blow fire on it, to melt it. So I will gather you in my anger and in my fury, and I will leave you there and melt you. Yes, I will gather you and blow on you with the fire of my wrath, and you shall be melted in its midst. As silver is melted in the midst of a furnace, so shall you be melted in its midst. Then you shall know that I am the Lord, having poured out my fury on you. So the people of Israel, instead of becoming pure silver in the midst of trials, they have become dross. They have become the junk that's in minerals that the jeweler is trying to get out to make pure gold or pure silver. So they have impurities in them that will cause them to burn. Let's turn over to Matthew 13. (41 and 42). The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that are offended and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So it is not the pure people of God who are being thrown into the furnace and consumed. It is the people who have given up on God that are being consumed. And then Matthew 13, 49 and 50 basically says the same thing. So it will be at the end of the age, the angels will come forth, separate the wicked from among the just, and cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So both peoples, good and bad, will have fiery trials, but only one gets consumed, and one comes through it, as we will see. So let's go back to Daniel 3, 8 through 18. Therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready, at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, and symphony, with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up." Now, can you imagine? They just flat out tell the king, "We don't even need to talk to you about this. We know how this is going to go, and we're not changing our minds." But we also know that in the end times, like it says, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews of not bowing down to the image. We know that in the last days, people will accuse us of not bowing down to the image, Sunday worship. In that day, if we don't bow to the beast, we will be persecuted for Christ's sake. You want to look at Matthew 24:9. It says, "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake." For a little while, Nebuchadnezzar has power to do what he wants, to cause people to fear for their lives. So let's turn over to Revelation 13. Because Revelation and Daniel go together. Drink. Revelation has like all the signs and symbols, and Daniel has like the practical application to all those signs and symbols. So Revelation 13:15 said, "He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed." So in the last days we are told, this is from the Great Controversy, as the Sabbath has become the special point of controversy throughout Christendom, and religious and secular authorities have combined to enforce the observance of the Sunday, the persistent refusal of a small minority to yield to the popular demand will make them objects of universal execration. It will be urged that the few who stand in opposition to an institution of the church and a law of the state ought not to be tolerated, that it is better for them to suffer than for a whole nation to be thrown into confusion and lawlessness. The same argument 1800 years ago was brought against Christ by the rulers of the people. "It is expedient for us," said the wily Caiaphas, "that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not." That's from John 11:50. This argument will appear conclusive, and a decree will finally be issued against those who hallow the Sabbath of the fourth commandment, denouncing them as deserving of the severest punishment and giving the people liberty, after a certain time, to put them to death. Like I said, that was from the Great Controversy. When Nebuchadnezzar heard that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego had not bowed down, he was in a rage. This should remind us that we will have times when we feel intense anger or worse from other people, even when or because we are doing what is right in the sight of God. this story and how these young men react will teach us how to survive and thrive in the face of adversity. When the young men appeared before the king, it was like he couldn't believe what he had heard about them. He had put them in prominent positions because of their friendship with Daniel. So he basically tries to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, maybe you didn't understand me? Why aren't you afraid? Don't you see this impressive statue and hear the overwhelming music? And I think this is important. We're not going to go into it today, but he mentions music over and over and over again. And when the Bible repeats something over and over and over again, we need to pay attention to it. Just a little side note. He is confused because they're not afraid. He's like, don't you know I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace? And who is the God, little g, that will be able to save you? So them not bowing down to him makes him think that there is some sort of conspiracy against him. Being in power is not as easy as it seems from those of us who are not in power. There is a lot of other things people in power worry about, like coups, and who's going to take them out of their powerful position, and how are they going to leave a legacy. So Nebuchadnezzar's position is not sure. And so bringing in all these people and having them bow down to this image of gold is trying to show them, hey, I'm the most important guy. My kingdom is going to last forever. See, this whole statue of gold, it's never going to come to an end. But Nebuchadnezzar knows everyone else is bowing down because they are afraid. And he doesn't understand why these three are not afraid. There is a parallel event at the end of time. So let's look at Revelation 13:14 again, probably. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. So why didn't Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-Nego bow down to the image? For one, it would be a direct violation of the law of God. In this case, bowing to an image or an idol violates the first commandment, right? You shall have no other gods before me.